Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming today, which is another great day in Louisville, and for the history of Louisville as well. In my annual State of the City address about 2 weeks ago, I spoke about Louisville being one city and one community and one family. And it's important for us to know what works and what doesn't, what's important, what's meaningful amongst this great and good family that we call the great city of Louisville, and to make sure that we fix the things that need fixing and lift up and support milestones and celebrate as well. I noted that our interdependence as people in this city, especially as a city that strives for compassion, where everyone has an opportunity to reach their full human potential, is fueled by collective success. It's about the we, not the me, as Muhammad Ali would always say. And that we hadn't worked hard enough or paid enough attention to everyone, and we're trying to do better for everybody. This is part of that, and that's why I couldn't be prouder to stand here today as your mayor and prepare to sign a Juneteenth ordinance recently passed by the Metro Council. So I say to the council, well done. 2 years ago, in a summer of profound and righteous protest and unrest in the wake of the tragic deaths of George Floyd and our very own Breonna Taylor, we listened and learned that we needed to rethink and reimagine policing and public safety to ensure equity for all our Louisville family and how they were seen and treated. And we acted. We have worked to change cultures and outcomes and laws by banning no-knock warrants, by creating a civilian review board, by hiring a new police chief, by ordering an independent investigation into policing and following its recommendations, amongst other measures. This is substantive work to improve all the lives in our city, but particularly those of Black Louisvillians. At the same time, why we're here today is substantive too, because amongst its many meanings to people, Juneteenth stands for representation, when for too long there was none or too little, and certainly too late. It's important for us to recognize that not every American attained freedom on July 4th, 1776. That should be obvious. For enslaved African Americans, freedom came almost a century later, and only after a civil war, and only after thousands of still enslaved people in Texas learned of their freedom on June 19, 1865, months after the war ended, and more than 2 years after Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. The anniversary of this day of liberation is known as Juneteenth, and it's also known as the Second Independence Day. The Juneteenth flag, whose colors are red, white, and blue, is a brilliant reminder that formerly enslaved people were and are Americans. Their independence has long been celebrated in and by Black communities as Juneteenth, the month of June, obviously. During this time of debate, today in America and in Kentucky, this time of debate around what kind of history should be taught in our schools, it is vitally important to underscore that all of our history should be taught. The times that we are proud of and the times that we are ashamed of. The hijacking or whitewashing of our history is a disservice to our nation, an insult to our intelligence, and a threat to our future. My hope is that the Juneteenth commemoration and celebrations will serve as a time for learning and a commitment to beautifully diverse and strong America, where Black history is understood by all Americans as American history. So 2 years ago, I signed an executive order recognizing Juneteenth as a city holiday starting in 2021. Last year, I signed an executive order that established a Juneteenth Jubilee Commission to honor this great history with an annual celebration. I asked Wanda Mitchell-Smith to be the founder of this commission, and I'm very grateful for her leadership. Wanda, thank you so much. The ordinance that I will sign today ensures that Juneteenth takes its rightful place among the city's most important dates and commemorations every year. Thanks to this ordinance, representation is here and now always will be. Before I turn this over to some great Louisvillians to tell you more, I'd like to mention the members of this commission who are putting together a week's worth of exciting activities for this Juneteenth. More details to come as we get closer to June, and I really appreciate the commission's service to the community. They include Wanda Mitchell-Smith, who I just mentioned from my office. Metro Council passed this ordinance thanks to the hard work of Councilwoman Paula McCraney, District 7, Councilwoman Keisha Dorsey, District 3, and Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur, District 4. Celeste Lanier from the University of Louisville is on our commission, along with Al Cornish of the National Panhellenic Council, Dawn Wilson representing our LGBTQA community, Nikki Lanier from Harper Slade, Barbara Lynn Jameson from Kentucky Opera, Dawn G. of Wave TV, Jennifer Green from Yum Brands, and Carol Jones Clay from Republic Bank. So a big thanks to all of our commission members. Let's give them a round of applause. As I said, obviously we could not get this done without our council, and I'd like to thank Councilwoman Paula McCraney for her leadership in this effort, and she is now going to share a few words with us. Councilwoman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a councilwoman, usually we find ourselves juggling many balls at one time. But constituent services, taking care of the needs of District 7 constituents, is my #1 goal. But a very close second is enacting legislation. And it's very rare that you get an opportunity as a legislator to be a part of legislation that's crucial to the community. I've been blessed to be a part of several key pieces of legislation, but today's ordinance is very special to me because it represents an entire community, and it represents the teaching of American history. It is so significant because today, Black history is under attack. So this is a reminder to us that Black history is American history, and we should work together as a community to commemorate and celebrate all who have contributed to this great country. But let me be clear that because of this celebration of freedom from slavery, we cannot forget that none of us are really free. None of us is free until we're free from gun violence. None of us is free until we are free from hatred and racism. And no one is free until we are free from the injustices that we have seen throughout these years. Let us work together as a community to build on these relationships and move forward as a community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Beautifully said. I think we should also just mark, obviously, there's a terrible injustice going on in Ukraine right now with the Russian invasion taking place there, where the freedom of the Ukrainians is now under threat. So all kinds of issues still to work out in the world, but we'll do what we can do here in Louisville to celebrate our path toward a more just society. So next we're going to hear from Michael Meeks, the Chief Equity Officer for Louisville Metro. Michael?
Thank you, Mayor. Most of us know the story of and the history of Juneteenth, and how nearly 2 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, soldiers announced to residents in Galveston, Texas, that the former slaves had been freed. But I'm going to invite you to close your eyes for a moment and take a few seconds with me to imagine that day. I ask you to put yourself in the position of an African American who's only known the American institution of slavery. And you've just been told that you're now, after all of these years, in the twinkling of an eye, are free. Where do you go? How do you get there? What do you do? Who do you tell? How would you feel? For me, it would be jubilant. So, elevating recognition of that moment in our collective history is the essence of the Juneteenth celebration. And the reason why we're here, to institutionalize and codify Juneteenth as one of the most important dates and events we celebrate in this community each year. Again, our heartfelt thanks to all of the civil rights titans who have been in our community and left us. I'm going to quote from Abraham Lincoln, those individuals who have so costly a sacrifice, have laid so costly a sacrifice on the altar of freedom. Just remember those individuals that have been so instrumental in making our community a community. I'd like to thank Councilmember Arthur for his leadership, Councilmember McCraney for her meticulous attention to detail, Councilmember Dorsey for her determination, Councilmember Piagentini for thinking outside the box, all of the co-sponsors of the legislation, and all the council members who voted in favor of it. Thank you. Also, our corporate citizens for their support and their generous donations and sponsorships that will come in the future. The commissioners for their outstanding service, and our beloved Louisville Metro residents, which we all proudly serve. Finally, Mayor Fischer, for his steady hand, his unwavering focus on equality and equity, and his compassionate heart. Thank you, Mayor Fischer. The Office of Equity, the Office for Women, the Human Relations Commission, Lean Into Louisville, and our staff stand ready, willing, and excited about assisting the Commission with the outstanding opportunities and events and activities that will come into fruition in the next few months and in the coming years. We look forward to continuing our equity work in the future, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Very nice. He spoke about a civil rights titan in our community. Well, Raul Cunningham just walked in looking very low-key over here. Raul, thank you for everything you've done for our community. I'd like to mention, too, Councilwoman McCraney was up here and spoke so beautifully about the council, and Michael mentioned them as well. This was a unanimous vote by the council, which I think we're proud of and certainly is the right thing to do, but want to point that out. We've got a tremendous community asset with the Kentucky Center for African American Heritage in the building. But we have a tremendous asset in a person with its director, Akram Burton, who inspires us in so many different ways, from a teaching standpoint, from a historian standpoint, from an arts standpoint as well. And we're certainly blessed to have Akram with us here today to share a few words. Akram Burton.
Thank you, Mayor. When Wanda called me, or the boss, I should say, called me and said that you need to be here to talk about what the next steps are. You know, last year I spoke a great deal about the history of, Juneteenth and the significance. And now that we're embarking upon the second year of it being a federal, holiday, a national holiday, I actually gave some thought to what are our next steps? What do we need to do? And I just wanted to say that, you know, teaching about Juneteenth, teaching about slavery is very, very important. All right, we need to know about the atrocities that have happened to my ancestors, many people, the impact that it's had on the African continent. But I want to expand this conversation a bit about this, because what we often don't realize is that 400 years of slavery is dwarfed by 8,000 years of history. And what I mean by that is that Africa has a very glorious past, a very glorious history. Our people began our great and mighty walk in the Nile Valley of Africa to the Americas, yet we know very little about our great and mighty walk. Although it is important to know about the brutal system of slavery, centering our story in slavery says nothing about African history and culture before enslavement. Slavery is such a brutal introduction to our history. There is a larger context to our story. I believe the battle we have to fight is the battle for our minds, our battle basically for our historical memory. And that's what we're going through right now. They're trying to suppress our history. And what I am suggesting is we need to expand it, because it is large. There is an abundance of literature about African history and culture before our enslavement, not used in classrooms. We need to reinforce that African history and culture precedes our enslavement by thousands of years. Thousands. We have the right and responsibility to know the beginning of our story, not just focus on our darkest period in American and world history, 400 years of dark history. The Kentucky Center for African American Heritage is dedicated to promoting and preserving the truth, the whole truth, and not just fragments that limit our ability to know who we are and reach out and reach our full potential. By Juneteenth of 2022, the Heritage Center will have a permanent exhibition titled The Great and Mighty Walk. It's going to be a timeline depicting the general 8,000-year relationship between African and European civilizations. The timeline will provide a solid framing tool for studying history. In addition, the timeline offers a platform for individual study and personal development utilizing African-centered references. So this is what I feel we need to move forward. I think it's important that although, we have won battles and and moved forward, what I think is very essential for our young people today is to know who they are and where they came from. Thank you.
Thank you, Akram. I'd like to recognize another one of our commissioners, a gentleman who had a claim as an athlete and as a scholar, who went out and conquered much of the rest of the country with his skills, but decided to come home and help our HBCU here and tutor and bring along young men as individuals and on the basketball court, and we're pleased that he's one of our commissioners as well. So Jerry Eves, I want to say thank you for spending your time to help us in the city in so many different ways. Thank you. I think, too, it's reported that Councilman Ja'Cory Arthur is hanging out in the back with his kids, or is he here with us? Okay, so, well, Councilman, thank you for your guidance and your coaching and all this as well. We've got a great partner at Waterfront Park that has really helped with a lot of the Juneteenth events, and it was performing Juneteenth events long before it was popular as well. So we're pleased that Deborah Belitsky is with us here, who's the CEO of Waterfront Park. Deborah?
Good morning. We, as the mayor said, we started our work several years ago on Juneteenth in partnership with Councilman Arthur, who actually was not a councilman at that time. And we produced a Juneteenth Jubilee in Waterfront Park, which was a beautiful celebration through music and art of the Juneteenth holiday. Over the last few years, we expanded our involvement. We started working with Wanda and the Metro Council, and we expanded our involvement to include some educational programming and some art camps in partnership with Louisville Visual Art. We are very excited to continue our involvement with the Juneteenth Commission, and I personally am very excited to work with these very inspiring individuals and continue to promote the community awareness of the significance and the history of the Juneteenth holiday. Thank you.
All right, as we close up here, let's talk about President Barack Obama, our nation's first and only black president thus far, and what he said of Juneteenth. Quote, "It's a celebration of progress. It's an affirmation that despite the most painful parts of our history, change is possible, and there is still so much work to do." So there is no question about that. This is often the case when President Obama said things, but we'll continue to do our work here. So he's right. Juneteenth is part of our history, our shared history, the proud moments and the painful. We own all of it. We claim all of it, just like we claim our shared future. And that should be a just and an equitable future where we're creating it together. And we have certainly more road to go, and we always will. And we will pass the torch to the next generation. But this walk is never over. So signing this ordinance, ensuring Juneteenth's prominent place in Louisville's family, supports the President's affirmation and the will of the citizens of Louisville that change and progress is possible, and it's right here, and it's right now. Juneteenth is part of that, along with all of our other good work on racial equity. So let's keep moving forward, and let's fight the forces, just to underscore what Akram spoke about, that are trying to push our history away from us, our history away from us. That's how we learn and create a better future. I'm pleased to sign this today. So this is ordinance number 17, series 2022, and it's an ordinance establishing the Juneteenth Jubilee Commission, many of whom are with us here. It's this brilliant group of people that are going to teach us both about our past, but shepherd us into a bright future and inspire countless other people to join the cause. So with the stroke of a pen,
There it is.
it is now official. Thanks, everybody.